The announcement lasted less than a minute, but its impact tore through the royal household like a blade. King Charles had not merely changed a seating plan or cancelled a single invitation. He had issued a direct instruction excluding Camilla from every private royal gathering reserved for the monarch's immediate family. She heard the decision in a room filled with courtiers, and for several unbearable seconds, nobody dared look at her. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew everyone around the table understood the order. Public royal engagements were official duties carried out for the crown, including ceremonies, charity appearances, and state receptions. Private royal events were different: family dinners, personal commemorations, confidential retreats, holiday gatherings, and meetings where cameras and outsiders had no place. By removing his wife from those moments, the king was not changing her title. He was declaring that public rank no longer guaranteed private trust. Camilla watched as the monarch placed a signed instruction before his senior private secretary. "This applies without exception," he said. At first, she believed the document concerned another household. Then, the secretary turned the page toward her, and she saw her name beside a list of cancelled access: Windsor dinners, memorial gatherings connected to Queen Elizabeth, weekends at Sandringham, and closed meetings involving William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, and Sophie. The Queen consort did not shout. She removed her glasses, folded them carefully, and asked whether her husband truly intended to separate her from his family. Charles answered without anger. Marriage, he told her, did not create an automatic right to enter every private family space, especially after confidence had been damaged. His restraint cut deeper than fury because it left her nothing to fight except the decision. A hidden consultation had already sealed her fate. William, Princess Anne, and 2 senior household officials had met with the sovereign before the order was signed. The sealed consultation was a confidential family review, meaning its discussion was restricted to those invited. Camilla had not known it was happening. One sentence frightened her most: "Until the sovereign determines that confidence has been restored." This was not a scheduling change. It was a formal withdrawal of personal trust. Camilla rose and walked toward the door. William stood in the corridor, silent and unsurprised. She understood that the future king had known. But the silence between Camilla and William carried a history far more painful than the order itself. And to understand why Charles finally chose exclusion, the people standing on either side of that corridor had to be understood first. This was not simply a conflict between a king and his wife. It was the collision of 3 private histories that had never truly been reconciled. Charles saw a marriage he had defended for decades. Camilla saw a position she had fought patiently to earn. William saw the woman permanently connected to the deepest wound of his childhood. Now all 3 stood inside the same royal family, but no longer inside the same circle of trust. William remained alone in his Windsor office before the order was announced, reading a private note from Charles for the 3rd time. The Prince of Wales was the direct heir, meaning he stood next in line to inherit the throne. That position gave him duty, but it also gave every family wound a future consequence. He placed the note beside a photograph of Diana, closed his eyes, then signed his agreement to the new arrangement. Camilla felt the loss differently. She had endured years of public judgment, cold glances, and whispered comparisons to stand beside the king. Yet acceptance before crowds had never become belonging behind closed doors. The exclusion took away the one reward she believed marriage had finally secured: a place inside his closest family circle, where rank mattered less than trust. Charles carried both burdens at once. As a husband, he had defended her dignity and protected her from humiliation. As sovereign, the reigning monarch responsible for holding the royal household together, he could no longer ignore the widening distance between his wife and eldest son. In a private conversation recorded in Anne's written account, he admitted that shielding Camilla from every consequence might drive William away completely. Anne did not soften her warning. The Princess Royal, the traditional title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, told her brother that polite appearances could no longer contain the resentment building inside the family. Catherine had also asked for firmer boundaries after details from an intimate gathering reached people outside the household. She demanded no punishment, but her concern forced Charles to act. Camilla approached him later at Windsor while he reviewed correspondence. She asked whether William had demanded her removal. The king placed his pen on the desk and looked directly at her. He did not need to. The answer broke something inside her. Charles had not surrendered to his son. He had reached the judgment himself. To him, exclusion protected the crown. To William, it protected Catherine and the children. To Camilla, it erased decades of sacrifice with one signature, and buried behind the formal order was one unforgettable night at Sandringham. The dinner, where a single conversation crossed a line Charles could no longer pretend had not been crossed. The point of no return came 6 weeks earlier, beneath the appearance of an ordinary family dinner at Sandringham. There were no cameras, no speeches, and no officials recording what was said. Yet before the following afternoon, details from that private table had traveled beyond the estate. The betrayal was not merely that someone had spoken, it was what had been repeated, and whose future had suddenly become the subject of whispers. Charles gathered Camilla, William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, and Sophie to discuss the family's private schedule, the children's safety, and the pressure created by public attention. Sandringham was the monarch's country estate used for private family gatherings. Phones remained outside, no minutes were taken, and every word around the table was meant to stay there. That trust mattered, because private honesty could survive only when nobody feared becoming tomorrow's palace whisper. William broke the calm first. He asked his father to guarantee that George, Charlotte, and Louis would never be used to strengthen another person's public position. Camilla answered that the children might need to serve the wider institution. The institution meant the monarchy of duty, family roles, and public service. Catherine heard something darker in the phrase, a claim over her children's future. Catherine placed her napkin beside her plate and told the queen consort that decisions involving the children belonged to their parents. William reached beneath the table and held his wife's hand. Camilla stiffened, replying that years beside the crown had taught her what service demanded. Catherine did not retreat. Experience, she said, did not create authority over George, Charlotte, or Louis. Charles tried to soften the clash, but his son asked whether he agreed with his wife. The king hesitated. That pause wounded William because it offered no protection, and it wounded Camilla because it offered no defense. By morning, a charity advisor repeated Catherine's exact words during a recorded telephone call with a palace aide. A household inquiry, an internal review used to trace misconduct, followed the trail to a member of Camilla's private office. The aide had received a late-night summary from her. She denied ordering any leak, but admitted discussing the dinner afterward. Charles read the inquiry report alone. He circled, "Private family discussion disclosed," removed his glasses, and pressed both hands firmly against the desk. The betrayal was not only the leak. Camilla had treated family pain as information her household was entitled to possess. When she learned William had seen the report, she demanded to face him directly. The Sandringham dinner had cracked the family's fragile peace, but the confrontation that followed would destroy the final layer of politeness protecting Camilla and William from what they truly felt. There were no aides in the room when Camilla finally confronted William. No private secretaries, no carefully prepared statements, and no witnesses who could interrupt when the conversation became dangerous. She entered believing the prince had engineered her humiliation. He entered believing she had once again allowed private pain to become palace currency. When the door closed behind them, years of restrained resentment finally lost their protection. Camilla had demanded the meeting after learning that William reviewed the Sandringham inquiry. Charles allowed it reluctantly, but refused to enter, believing his presence would turn honesty into performance. The smaller sitting room at Windsor offered no ceremonial shelter. An audience chamber was a formal room used for official meetings. This private space stripped away rank and left only two wounded people facing each other. Camilla asked whether he had wanted her excluded. William stayed on his feet and said he wanted boundaries, accountability, and protection for Catherine and the children. She answered that those careful words disguised a punishment he had desired for years. William did not deny Diana's memory shaped how he saw her. His voice tightened as he insisted this was not revenge for the past. It was about his wife, his children, and conversations that had become material for competing palace households. The future king would not allow private family pain to be converted into strategy. Camilla moved a chair aside and stepped closer. She demanded that he look at her, not as the symbol of his childhood loss, but as his father's wife. The queen consort accused him of never giving her a true chance to belong. William finally sat, yet his answer remained hard. Belonging required trust, and trust could not survive when every disagreement traveled beyond the room where it began. Camilla then made the admission that changed everything. In her documented account of the meeting, she acknowledged briefing her communications secretary after Sandringham because she feared Catherine's rebuke would be used to weaken her. A communications secretary manages public messaging and press responses. Her confession proved that self-protection had mattered more than the family's promise of privacy. William asked whether she had discussed other gatherings with her staff. Camilla paused. She gave no answer, and that silence suggested the inquiry had uncovered only part of the damage. Charles waited alone outside. When the door opened, the king studied his son, then his wife, and understood that reconciliation had moved farther away for the foreseeable future. William had spoken with the force of an heir protecting his family, but the final authority belonged to Charles, and the machinery behind his decision was about to reveal how completely Camilla's influence had been contained. Camilla believed Charles had acted under emotional pressure from William. The truth was more unsettling. The decision had been shaped through a quiet alliance of figures who rarely agreed on everything but had reached the same conclusion about her access. Anne brought the warning. Catherine defined the boundary. William demanded protection. Charles signed the order. And once those four positions aligned, Camilla discovered that even a queen could be isolated without a single public title being removed. Anne met her brother in the library and placed the Sandringham report between them. The monarch controlled invitations to royal gatherings because those occasions were personal, not constitutional. Charles could decide who entered family dinners and retreats without changing Camilla's title or public duties. The distinction mattered because she could remain visible beside him publicly while losing access to conversations that shaped trust behind palace doors. Anne did not ask Charles to end his marriage or humiliate his wife. The Princess Royal was the title traditionally given to the sovereign's eldest daughter, and her long service gave her influence without formal power over the king. She looked at him and said, "You cannot demand trust from William while excusing every breach around him." Charles stiffened. He reminded his sister that Camilla had endured years of hostility to support him. Anne answered that past loyalty could not become permanent immunity from present consequences. Her words forced him to face the choice he had avoided: protect his wife automatically, or preserve the wider family before resentment pushed William away. Catherine's private letter made that danger real. She promised to treat Camilla respectfully in public, but refused to attend intimate gatherings where discussions involving her children might travel beyond the room. Charles read the letter twice, folded it, and placed it beneath William's request for protected family boundaries. He understood that silence could cost him the Wales family's presence altogether. Edward and Sophie added support through a documented household account, recalling 2 earlier occasions when private remarks resurfaced during planning meetings. Their intervention proved the fear extended beyond William and Catherine. The trusted confidant supported restriction, and Edward agreed that discretion had weakened. Charles signed a second measure Camilla had not seen. Her staff would receive no briefings about closed family discussions without his approval. She retained ceremony, rank, and public visibility, but lost the informal channel through which influence had traveled. Then, the first invitations were prepared. Her name was missing. The order had been signed in quiet rooms, but its true cruelty would be felt when the family assembled without her, and Camilla was forced to watch the new reality take shape from the other side of a closed door. The first exclusion did not happen at a grand ceremony. It happened at dinner. A table was laid inside Windsor Castle for Charles, William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, and Sophie. Camilla's place was not moved to another position. It was removed entirely. Hours before the family gathered, she received a revised schedule, confirming that the evening would proceed without her. And the simplicity of that omission made the punishment impossible to ignore. Camilla read the revised program twice while preparing for the evening. The dinner marked a private family tradition created by Queen Elizabeth, an intimate gathering where relatives shared personal memories away from cameras and official ceremony. Because she had always attended beside Charles, her sudden absence could not be dismissed as a harmless scheduling change. The household records made the truth plain. Camilla asked her dresser to leave. Once alone, the queen consort removed the brooch chosen for dinner and returned it to its case. For one painful moment, she considered going anyway. Her private secretary warned that arriving without an invitation would turn a family dispute into a constitutional embarrassment, meaning a private conflict could begin damaging the public dignity of the crown. Charles entered before leaving for Windsor. Camilla asked whether he truly intended to sit through dinner while everyone stared at the empty place beside him. The king answered that there would be no empty place because the seating plan had already been changed. His words were calm. Their meaning was brutal. Camilla asked him to stay. Charles reached toward her hand, then stopped before touching it. He said canceling the dinner would make every boundary meaningless. Then he walked out, leaving his wife beside the unopened jewelry case, with nothing but the sound of the closing door. William noticed his father's distraction at Windsor. When Charles raised a glass to his mother's memory, his hand trembled. Anne later told the prince, through a documented private account, that Camilla had sent a personal message for the table. The monarch refused to have it read, believing even a written presence would weaken the exclusion. Staff members immediately began separating public and private schedules. Edward and Sophie received the family arrangements, while Camilla's office received only details connected to official appearances. Catherine watched the division take effect and understood its cost. Charles remained Camilla's husband before the country, but inside the family's most personal traditions, she had vanished. The separation was no longer symbolic. Everyone around them understood. Camilla had finally experienced the consequence Charles intended. Yet that same night the king sought out his son alone. And what passed between them shifted the conflict away from punishment and toward a harder question of mercy. Long after the Windsor dinner ended, Charles entered William's private sitting room without an aid or advance warning. He carried no red box, no official papers, and no authority except that of a father asking his son to listen. For years, the crown had stood between them whenever conversations became painful. That night, Charles left it outside the door and admitted that excluding Camilla had cost him more than anyone around the table understood. William watched his father enter, but felt no victory. The prince had secured the boundary he believed Catherine and the children needed, yet seeing Charles shaken gave him no satisfaction. A red box was the official case used to carry government papers to the monarch, and its absence mattered. The king had not come to command. He had come as a father carrying a private wound. Charles chose the chair opposite his son instead of the formal seat beside the fireplace. He admitted that removing Camilla from the dinner had felt like tearing his marriage into public duty and private rejection. The monarch feared losing his wife emotionally while trying to recover William's trust. William answered carefully. He had never asked his father to stop loving her. He had asked him to stop protecting her from every consequence. The future king acknowledged that Diana's memory had made trust difficult, but the Sandringham breach was real. Diana remained present in his caution, but he refused to let old grief replace present evidence. Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis deserved safety, and he would not apologize for defending them. Charles lowered his eyes. Through a recorded private conversation, later preserved in a family account, he admitted that every criticism of Camilla had long felt like a judgment on his own choices. That instinct had turned protection into avoidance. He had defended her so fiercely that he stopped asking whether she had caused harm. William offered neither forgiveness nor exile. Camilla could return to selected gatherings only if she accepted responsibility directly, restricted her staff's access, and rebuilt confidence through conduct rather than demands. Charles then revealed that she had already requested a private meeting with Catherine to admit discussing the Sandringham dinner. William agreed not to oppose it. Catherine alone would decide whether to accept. Charles thanked him, but did not reach for an embrace. The distance remained, yet it no longer felt permanent. Before the meeting could happen, however, the exclusion escaped the palace. Father and son had found the first narrow path toward repair, but the palace could no longer contain the story, and by morning, the world was staring at Camilla's absence as if it were a judgment on the monarchy itself. By sunrise, the secret was no longer confined to Windsor. A single photograph appeared across breakfast broadcasts, Charles arriving for the private family dinner, with William and Anne walking behind him, while the space traditionally occupied by Camilla remained unmistakably empty. The image contained no argument, no official statement, and no visible anger. Yet to millions watching, it communicated something more powerful than words. The king had entered his family circle without his queen. A household member confirmed, through a recorded briefing, that Camilla had been excluded from private events while retaining her official duties. That difference mattered. Ceremonial status covered public appearances, state occasions, and formal service, while personal standing determined who entered family dinners, private retreats, and closed conversations. Buckingham Palace issued a brief statement calling such gatherings matters for the king and his family. Its refusal to deny the exclusion became confirmation in everything but name. The London Chronicle captured the crisis with one front page. Beneath the Windsor photograph, 4 words dominated the morning edition: "The King walks in alone." The empty space beside Charles became more powerful than any palace explanation because it showed the nation what official language tried to contain. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace before noon. Some held photographs of Diana and praised William for protecting Catherine and the children. Others argued that humiliating Camilla threatened the stability Charles had spent years building. The debate became personal because the monarchy suddenly looked less like an institution and more like a wounded family, arguing behind locked doors. A senior royal presenter sharpened the story during a live evening program. In a recorded broadcast, she called it "a marriage preserved in public and suspended in private." The phrase spread across radio discussions and social media within minutes. Camilla watched alone at Clarence House. When the Windsor image appeared, she asked for the television to be turned off. The Queen Consort continued staring at the dark screen after the room fell silent, as though the image remained there. Charles rejected advice to stage a joint appearance. The king said using affection as public theater would deepen the dishonesty that caused the crisis. William supported that refusal, while Catherine agreed to meet Camilla without either man present. That meeting became the only path left at all. Titles could establish rank and command public respect, but they could not manufacture trust behind closed doors. The final decision now rested with 2 women, not the press office surrounding them. The country had already delivered its arguments, but the true verdict would be reached away from the cameras. When Camilla entered a room with Catherine, and finally faced the damage without Charles standing between them. Camilla arrived for the meeting without jewelry, aids, or a prepared statement. Catherine was already waiting. There would be no photographers to capture regret, and no officials to reshape their words afterward. For the first time since the Sandringham dinner, the 2 women faced each other without husbands, titles, or palace households acting as shields. What followed did not erase the betrayal, but it finally determined whether exclusion would become permanent punishment or the beginning of earned repair. Catherine chose a private room at Windsor and kept Charles, William, and every household official outside. The choice mattered because neither woman could hide behind rank or advisors. Camilla sat opposite her and admitted, in a documented private account of the meeting, that she had briefed her office after Sandringham because she feared losing influence. Camilla did not excuse herself. The Queen Consort acknowledged that fear had pushed a private family conflict beyond the room where it belonged. Catherine answered that the deepest wound was not disagreement over George, Charlotte, or Louis. It was discovering that words involving her children had been treated as a threat requiring strategy. Catherine lifted the sealed Sandringham inquiry from the table. An inquiry was an internal review used to establish what happened and who carried responsibility. She returned it to its folder and told Camilla it would never be used for public humiliation, but its lesson would not be forgotten. Camilla apologized without asking for instant forgiveness. She admitted that years spent fighting for acceptance had made every boundary feel like an attack. In protecting her position, she had failed to protect the family's confidence. Catherine agreed that limited private access could eventually return after a period of separation. The first step would be a small family lunch, not a grand celebration, and Camilla's office would receive no account of their conversation. Charles entered after Catherine left. Camilla told the king the order should remain until trust was genuinely rebuilt. He took her hand, recognizing that accepting the consequence was the first act capable of ending it. William offered no sudden warmth, but he accepted the path. Catherine's dignity remained protected, his boundary stood, and permanent exile was no longer necessary. Rank could command ceremony, visibility, and honor, but it could never guarantee belonging. Trust had become the highest title of all. The doors of the private royal circle did not reopen that day, but the bitterness surrounding them finally lifted, and for the first time, every person involved understood exactly what would be required before Camilla could enter again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.